welcome to the Path Podcast, the podcast that provides transformative insights for authentic success. My name is Chris Weiss. Together with my partners, Stuart Ferguson and Toby Quinton, we make up True Path Consulting, where our mission is to maximize executive performance and drive personal growth by guiding leaders on a journey of self-fulfillment and true success. Again, I want to thank you for pressing play on whatever device you're listening to us on today. It means a ton to us that you're here. Our hope is that through some of the stories and interviews, you'll find something within yourself, something that moves you to get curious, possibly something that triggers you to take action in your life. You see, the goal of this podcast and in our coaching partnership is to help people find their ideal selves without the motivation of that personal or professional crisis that tends to happen. We will bring up topics and curate discussions that will help you take action to find out who you are showing up as in the roles that you play in your life, and ultimately helping you paint the picture of who you want to be and what's getting in your way from being who you want to be in your life. We only get one shot at this awesome thing called life. So let's stop being okay with being miserably comfortable. That's actually the topic of our podcast today. It's a foundation in our coaching practice. It's something that we want to talk about. Instead, let's be more intentional and following a path of meaning and purpose. With that being said, I just want to check in and formally introduce my crew that's going on this journey with me. Toby, how you doing this morning, buddy?
I'm great, man. Looking forward to this conversation. I know the three of us have talked a lot about this in and out of different chapters of our own lives, work together and time we've spent. So I'm excited about it, but good to see you both and looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, man. Hey, Stu. How are you, buddy?
I'm good. Good morning, or whatever time it is you're listening to this. This is one of those topics that is a lived experience. I think for a lot of us, it's not just something that I think we're going to pontificate about. It's actually something that we've seen in others and that we've seen within ourselves. So I'm excited to share certainly how it showed up in my life and how it showed up in the people that I've led over the years, and a great discussion about maybe some of the cause, but more importantly, the hope of empowerment to try to take control of that narrative again. And we know people are in different places. In some extreme cases, that miserably comfortable is far deeper than just a mindset. It's actually can be an illness. And so we want to be conscious of that. And I know Toby's going to speak to that as well. But, from being a parent to being a husband to being a leader in a company, this shows up quite a bit. And I think it's interesting how we put a name to it. And I'm grateful for Toby for doing that. So I'm excited to be here. This isn't one of those topics where I think we're going to joke around a lot. Or at least we might. I don't assume we are, but I got to tell you that there's some humor in the fact of how we end up there, right? And the behaviors that we show when we're in that space. When you look back over it, there's actually some pretty funny moments I've had with my wife and with my kids operating in that space, thinking I was 100% great. And the reality was I was pretty diminished. So look forward to sharing some of that throughout the talk today.
Yeah, thanks for that, man. Yeah, and hopefully, we don't want to be too serious on all these podcasts. We do bring up some serious stuff. This one's a big one. I think especially for us. I mean, you could tell in the intros, like it resonated with us. Toby, you and I were having a conversation when I had left my job and started to pursue this new passion of mine with you, with executive coaching, and really following my passion and purpose in life. And so excited about that. And in our coaching and just our conversations, you brought up that word, being miserably comfortable. And I had never, at that point, I never really defined how I was feeling, and when you put those two words together, it shook me, because it was exactly how I've felt for so many years, not even knowing it, right? Stu and I had a conversation the other day, and we were talking about that's how we're taught to be as men, right? Just get through it. But when does it get to the point where the miserableness and the way you feel inside is too much, And I think that's where I got to the point, and I'll talk a little bit about my experience with this and some of the moments that the universe was telling me, hey, dummy, this isn't right. Something's not right here. You got to start doing what's right for you. And yeah, you put yourself in this position, and you created this life for yourself. But is it truly the life that you want? And are you okay with continuing to stay miserably comfortable? And now I just see it in so many of the people that we talk with. And it's, like I said before, it's a foundation of our coaching practice and a lot of our conversations with the executives that we talk to. So I just want to thank you for introducing me to that, Toby. And I know you see it in a lot of your clients. So maybe you can give us a little bit more insight into it and how you came up with it.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember that convo, Chris, and I do even remember kind of the impact that it had on you. It took me back to how it impacted me when I remember being in a session with a team, and I remember going around the room asking them a lot about how they're feeling. And it was a real kind of an individual conversation with each person in that respective team, even though we were there talking about the team health. And as, I'm going halfway through the room, I'm taking some notes mentally about what I'm hearing. And it really is just something that came out of, and I probably read it or something like that through schools or whatever else, the schooling that I went through, that the concept of comfort came up, and it's not unfamiliar to anyone, but I was like, hey, I'm picking up a vibe that everyone in this room, at least from what I've heard from so far, seems miserably comfortable. And I'll tell you what, you could tell the entire move shifted, the room shifted. Everyone looked a little cross-eyed at me. Some people seemed very mad that I said that, and, kind of like offended that I would say something like that, like that's not who I am. Yeah. But by the time I got through the rest of the team, there was a collective, like, you know what? I think you just nailed what we're feeling, or what I'm feeling as an individual. And, and since then, and that was many, many years ago, I've just been in a lot of rooms with either individuals one-on-one or collectively as a group, as I've referenced on some of those team sessions. And it just time and time again is I don't want to say it's a phenomenon. It's almost like a condition, if you will, that people are in this position of, and I'm going to use the word choosing. My wife reminds me, and kind of her therapy background, that not everyone chooses miserably comfortable. And I want to appreciate that and recognize that, the folks that are dealing with some mental health issues and anxiety and all the gamut of things that happen. I don't know that people always choose it, but there is a larger portion of people in my experiences in life that, and me included, they will choose miserably comfortable. Now we'll never put the name of that on there. Hey, I'm choosing miserably comfortable. No one's ever going to say that aloud. Yeah. But if you actually walk through, tell me how it feels right now to be you and where you're at in your life, they agree at the end of that, gosh, I'm miserable. And I'm, and the notion for me is that, I could do this with my eyes closed. I get into that routine. I literally just go through. It's the old commercial. I'm old enough. Some of you, I don't even know if you two are old enough, but like go making the donuts, the old Dunkin' Donut deal. Like I think
time to make the donuts, baby.
Time to make the donuts. But it's just one of those, so there's this piece of, is it okay that I'm good at what I do? I know how to do what I do. And I'm literally just going to keep going through the motions of doing that. I don't know that I necessarily say to people when I'm working with them, you need to answer that question. Is that okay? From an outside point of view, you seem like you're in a good spot. But how do you feel? And usually the word that I usually kind of try to get them to is, how happy are you? And, and happy always has that connotation of that it's something, fluffy and unicorns and this, that, and the other. But every one of us is searching for happiness. We want it in our kids, we want it in our loved ones, and we want it for ourselves. And so I usually get the answer of they're not completely happy, usually unfulfilled. They usually kind of go down those kind of words of, I'm lacking purpose and direction. So, for me, it's always been that if you are miserably comfortable, are you willing to go through the misery of being uncomfortable? And typically what I find, my truth as a coach, doing this as long as I have now, people will actually choose the former.
Right.
They'll actually go with the less risk proposition of, I can just go about what I do because I know how to do it. They actually like me doing what I'm doing, and I literally can provide the things that I need to in my life, and I can just kind of keep making the donuts.
Well, there's also a stuckness part in it, Toby, right? Like you just when I look back on me, like I felt stuck. I mean, I was making a good living. I was doing what I wanted to do. My job was interesting because it was a lot of innovation, right? My last job, where it was like constantly innovating. And so it was exciting and stuff. But yet inside, I just I wasn't happy. It wasn't who I wanted to be or what I wanted to do. But yet I felt like I made this life for myself that I couldn't get out of. I couldn't get out of my own way. right? Like, and that's where I felt like just there was a stuckness. I don't even know if that's a word, but that's what I felt. I felt like there's no way I can make a change, and it took a lot of courage and a restructuring and things like that for me to be like, well, wait, maybe I can, and but I don't want to interrupt you, but that's what I was doing.
Yeah, and
I'm just curious about what, Stu, you thought.
Yeah, I'm thinking about what you said just a minute ago, Chris, in your opening, and based on our conversation earlier. Like, miserably comfortable is definitely a destination in my mind. It's a place that you end up. It's based on behaviors and decisions along the way and events that happen. But I go back to being in the military, in the Navy, and there's a bravado, certainly within men, I think, to take on the hard, to do the hard. There's an expectation, and actually there's a celebration of men that do that plug into the misery and sludge through it to get to the other side. And, a lot of times in our society, they're viewed as success because they were able to weather the storms that others couldn't. But at what cost, right? And that's, so when that term, I started to think about it, it's like from sports, I go back to playing football and remember having an injury and the coach saying, get back out there. And I'm like, no, my mom said, my parents said, if you're hurt, get off the field. And he's like, no, we need you for 2 more plays, figure it out. And it's like, in that moment, being out on that field, there's a part of me that's miserably comfortable. I know the position. I know what I need to do. I find great honor in executing for my coach, but in my mind and in my body, I am miserably comfortable to the point. And yet there's an ego that gets built off that of, man, I'm tough because I overcome that. And I just think there's a question of how well do you know oneself? How well, when do those challenges become something that is controllable, to Toby's point, versus allowing them to continue to define and create the pain that you live in. But I think when you were talking about here's your sign, I'm thinking, I think it was Jeff Foxworthy, right? Back when we were growing up, maybe in the 90s, the comedian that would, or maybe it wasn't him, but he'd give you that, here's your sign. And it was basically an idea that you were kind of a jackass, right? But if you think about all of the signs that came up throughout, I can say my adult life, that I made the conscious decision to ignore, because not because of fear, but because I thought in my mind, these are the tricks that circumvene success. These mental challenges, these roadblocks, these feeling of uncomfort, right? The feeling of pain, that's part of being a top performer is, the narrative that I told myself. And I think there's some truth to that. I don't want to take that away. I think you have to be able to overcome adversity to exceed in just in life. But there's a point to where that becomes your identity. And now it all of a sudden, to Toby's point, I'm choosing to live this way because I'm getting something out of it to some extent. So I appreciate, I think this topic could be a multiple session podcast just because there are so many different levels to it.
Yeah, totally agree.
Yeah, I think you're right, Stu. I appreciate that. That's really good from both of your point of view. Chris, to go back to what you said about that stuck part. See, as a coach, what I think is when I hear someone say that they're stuck, and maybe they're copping to, or I'm, giving them the words miserably comfortable, and then they're saying, no, that sounds a lot like me. That's a real good sign, in my opinion. Now, weirdly enough, why would you want to say that, someone feeling stuck and trapped or going in circles is good? It's the awareness. I find that a lot of people, though, aren't aware that they're miserably comfortable. Mm-hmm. Right. And so totally you became aware of it, Chris. And it's no surprise, this is your journey and your path, and you've been really becoming more of a student of self. But that awareness then is scary, right? Because then it's like, well, now I know that I'm in doing things that I know I could do with my eyes closed, but they're not fulfilling. They're not gratifying. They're not in alignment with my values and my purpose. And then I feel stuck. And so as coaches, this is our jobs to help people with where they are to where they would like ideally to be. But being stuck actually is a good thing, in my opinion, because it would create awareness. Now, the key is, for me, it's always been, do you have something worth the discomfort necessary to chase down and track down in your life? Meaning, do you have a vision for yourself and for how you want to show up in this world. Not only like, the skills you want to build to become a certain way and be proficient in an area, or the behavioral skills that you want to build as the father you want to be and the son you want to be, the friends you want to be.
That ideal
and
self.
That's really, for me, and it gets back to that, the coaching ideology of the ideal self. And the question that always comes as a coach to people is, how badly do you want it? What's the value in it for you? And that's the work of getting from a miserably comfortable state to an ideal state. And that the river that goes between those two kind of, if you will, sides of the water, people will just, again, as much as they say they want this, self-doubt, risk-taking, what would I lose if I actually did kind of change? And in your case, Chris, make a huge career leap. And same with you, Stu, like the different direction you're taking your life that I did in my own right. We're going to continue to be tested with that. And again, miserably comfortable, as bad as it sounds, is a hell of a lot safer place to be. To at a high level, you could say, wow, that's safer. At the end of the day, we all know that's not true. We all know that the words like regret, those words like, when they do those studies of people, 100 years or older, the centurions, what's your biggest regret in life? Didn't take enough risk. And that's what we're talking about, is the risk to leave what you could do and how you continue to be, to then go after this other ideal spot that you've identified. So it was interesting. I was doing a little, I went back through some of my notes in school and in the graduate studies of psychology, and I was reminded of the Viktor Frankl kind of a scenario that he brought up, that Viktor Frankl's patients would come to him, several of them, and then describe themselves as depressed. And he actually just pushed them. He suggested, I want you to pursue a very difficult goal to achieve. And that was pretty much his advice to him, is that go back, think of a very challenging goal that you want to achieve, and put the work into going after it. And what they time and then came back to him with, whether they achieved the goal or not, was this elevation of happiness, or this experience of happiness is a better way of saying it. So is it just an interesting that it's been for a long, long time that this notion of comfort and discomfort and the risk and the reward associated with it all has been out there. And it certainly is something very real that I think we all need to consider. Lastly, and I'm going to pass it to you guys real quick, is, I had someone just the other day, hey, when are you going to retire? Now, I think I'm getting that a lot. I don't think you guys yet, because I look like the old guy in the screen by a mile. So when you look old, they're always asking like, hey, when are you going to put up the cleats? And I looked over him and I was like, I'm going to do this until my last breath, if possible, and I love what I do. I'm on track with my purpose. I get to do it with two men I respect and love dearly. But I don't have any, I think retirement's overrated. That's what I said. Now, you guys know me well enough that I'll be pretty direct on some of these things. I probably should have thought about it, saying it differently, because this person was dying to retire, right?
Yeah.
But we all know this. Again, this is a news flash. You're not going to learn this first time on this podcast, is that, retirement, when people then get into retirement, their life expectancy, and, it's not a great stat for us that we get into this. We think I don't have to work. I don't have to do this. And I'm just going to go play golf or shuffleboard for the rest of my life. And it's like, listen, I don't want to ever say that those things aren't going to be great for people to do, but it's that whole pursuit of continuing to grow and continually to stretch yourself and continually being able to withstand the discomfort of all of that growth. And to me, that's what living's all about. And that's what, to me, it is for me. And I've experienced it firsthand for myself. And then I get to walk with my clients and the people we get to coach with, trying to help them also along their own respective journeys with that. So that's my thoughts on that. I know I hit a couple different topics there, but when I think of miserably comfortable and I think about what it takes commitment and the willingness to be uncomfortable. And most people don't want to choose that. Well, most people say they do, but most people don't jump in that water and try to get to the other side.
Why not?
Yeah. I mean, well,
like what?
It's easy. It's easy to stay there where you are, because you're not thinking about, you're not thinking about how you're going to feel 20 years from now. We're so caught up with how we want to feel right now. We want an immediate, probably feeling of not being overextended because there's so many people anxious right now.
Right.
So the idea of you taking on more challenge and getting out of your comfort zone and risking what you know and what is safe is crazy. But I also think there's a lot of people that just go through their, and I mean crazy from a point of view of just figure of speech, but there's a lot of bored people out there.
Right.
Bored, so bored with their lives, right? And they're anxious and they're bored, but yet again, the boredom they'll choose over the discomfort of getting out and trying something new and leaning forward into it. And so again, I'm not blaming anyone for where their current state is. I just want to ask them, are you happy? Are you fulfilled in it? Are you challenged by it? Are you getting up in the morning with a purpose? And so again, I clearly could go on and on and on for days about this, but I just want to know how you guys are, what you guys are taking from that or what your own experiences are with it.
Yeah, I'll no, I think Toby, I think you're nailing it. Where I find myself in this conversation, we've had lots of dialogue about this. In fact, Toby, you and I directly, you've helped me as well with this topic. And, certainly I think I had a version of the lightning crash. There was definitely a bit of disruption in my life that kind of pushed me down a path. But, this has been a lifelong challenge. This hasn't been due to a career or this has been, it shows up in marriage. It shows up as in friendships. It shows up in other areas where that, I just get very curious of where does it come from? Right. And then how do you manage it once it's there? And for me, for a lot of ways, it was so safe because I was the only one in pain. My circle around me, my wife, my children, coworkers, there was probably a feeling of challenge or there was something off, but it was easier for me to internalize that in my quiet, right? And keep trying to rationalize and push it down to the point to where I could wake up the next day and get back to work. Right. But it was so personal because for me, miserably comfortable was a byproduct of an incredibly overactive critical eye on myself, where it was constantly challenging me at the core of who I was. And it was based on insecurities. It was based on titles and egos and, I think unresolved decisions that I've made over the years that kind of built to a point to where here I am. I've got the white picket fence. I've got the big job. I got nice cars, a country club. I got everything that you thought, or at least growing up poor from a poor perspective. This is what success felt like.
He's in Philly right now. Oh, there he is.
Ooh, did I lose you? Sorry.
Yeah, just for a second. Go ahead.
Yeah,
We lost your country club. You were bragging about your country club that you're in.
Yeah, I mean, I had all these things and none of them, to that point, we know this, none of them, they were all masking the real challenge, which was the war inside me, right? And it was me being aware that the life that I had lived up to this point without really getting to the root cause of some of these challenges had just built up to the point to where, to your point, Chris and Toby, it was very difficult to see a way out. The only way out was extreme decisions like quit your job, leave your wife, move away, do something drastic to change it. And I actually have learned that it's much more subtle, right? It's much more internal. It's much more, it's a much different process. And so I think, what I keep coming back to is exactly what we've always talked about, even regardless of being miserably comfortable, the art of grounding, right? The art of getting back to the roots of who you are as a human.
Bingo.
Not that that's the answer, but I can tell you the answers are going to be found much more in that space than in the space of an imposter trying to live a fulfilled life, meanwhile being miserably comfortable internally.
Really well said, man. One of the things that you resonated there was like making drastic decisions, right? Like, Toby, you helped me get back to my values. You helped me get back to like my core, like, who do you want to be in this life, right? How do you want to show up? And you helped me do it like within the role that I was playing, even though I associated like my miserably, my unhappiness to like where I was in my career. Like that was my scapegoat. And it's interesting. Like I struggle with that because I did make a decision to leave. Now I gave 25 years to an organization. I gave everything I had, right? So it was probably time, and it was a little burnout, and there's a lot of that. But I want to make sure that like my pay it forward moment is to help other executives not have to make those drastic decisions. Like Toby, like what you did for me, like we broke it down, and you got me without like us really identifying it like we do in our coaching practice now. Like you got me grounded, man. Like you went through a value exercise with me and said, all right, well, family is most important. And your authenticity is most important. And how you show up in life is like, and we went through these values, and that started to resonate with me. Now it did take, in all true transparency, like it took a drastic moment for me to finally make the decision. It did. And it started, and Toby, you probably remember this, man. You were my first call, my panic attack in Dallas. Right. Like and this is what I said in the beginning, like the universe will tell you if you're miserable. And Stu, to your point, like we're wired. I mean, look at our parents, right? Like just grind it out, man. Like you grind it out, you do your job and you grind it out, and you shut up and you bring a paycheck in and you provide for your family. That's it. Right. And I just don't want to live like that. And the universe put me in a corner of a Marriott hotel room outside of the Dallas airport at 2 a.m. where I thought I was going to die. And thank goodness I passed out because, I thought this was it for me. And I woke up and didn't know what happened and talked to Toby about it. And it was the universe saying, dude, like something's got to change, bro. Like something's got to change. And then, Stuart, the restructuring of the work gave me that opportunity to choose me. And to jump out of that miserably comfortable space because of all the work that you and I did, Toby, together, right? Like it allowed me to jump out of that miserably comfortable space. And now, like I'm taking walks with my wife now, and she's like, this is awesome. Like Joy's never said that to me. Like she never said like, this is awesome. I mean, I don't know. I would like to think that it's awesome, but I don't think it was, and she's like, this is unbelievable that we get to do this now. And I'm so happy with how happy you are. So it's, the universe will tell you what's going on. I just want to, the people out, like, it doesn't take, retiring like I did. Like, it doesn't have to. It might for you but I don't think it does. And I think there's ways, to your points too, like there's small things to get grounded again, to figure out how to live your most authentic life. Aligned with your values, where you can be your most ideal self in the roles that you play as an executive, as whatever role you play at work and family and things like that. And that's where we want to focus on. And so, I don't know if I ever told you that, buddy, but I don't know where I'd be without you, brother. Like, and that's why when you called me and said, hey, let's go and do this together, I was like, oh, yeah, man, hey, man, if I can do for what you did to me, if I could do that for somebody else, sign me the hell up, man, because that's special.
Yeah, thanks, buddy.
Yeah.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that. I remember that call for sure. It brings me, though, such a brilliant point you're making. And I think it's one that we definitely need to emphasize on this, is that this is that groundedness that is a foundation of what the three of us are up to, and helping people get to that place and really and start there. Most people, I think this is just the point you're making, Chris, is just emphasize it. We then blame everything around us for where we are.
Yep. Totally.
I'm miserably comfortable because I work in a job that doesn't, or the company doesn't, or, my family doesn't, my wife doesn't, whatever. And so it's always that first, that insecure, it can't be me, it's got to be them.
Right.
And it's such a great point of like, I'm not saying that the path that we take in pursuit of what we want in our life doesn't end with those same conclusions. But what I would tell you is the work, though, doesn't start with those. It starts with ourselves. It starts with assessing our values and our wants and our dreams and our goals. And when we stop daydreaming, when did we as little kids that became men stop daydreaming? I think we still have them, but I think we quickly go into, I couldn't do that, shouldn't do that, too much risk. That's not me. I'm not skilled enough to do that, yada, yada, yada. And I get it. I don't know that we can always fulfill completely the dreams we have. I mean, I wanted to play NBA basketball. This guy was never going to do that, right? So, but on a more serious note, though, it is that point of really getting truthful and doing the work with ourselves first about where I am. And that's why it gets me back to, hey, I feel stuck. That's wonderful, because now you've got a little clarity of this is where I'm at. What's causing me to be stuck is really where I want people to work within themselves first. Do you know what you want and all of that? Because we usually, what we start with, I can't do that, I can't do this. So it's just a good point, because time and time again, I hear the whole, well, I'm miserably comfortable because I'm in a job that, doesn't allow me to be, okay, well, that could be true, but what do you want? Mm-hmm. Well, and can you find it within the company? Because I don't think the answer is to quit everything, to quit on the people in your life, to quit on the company because you think that's causing you this. The answer is to go inside. And again, it's very, very uncomfortable to slow down and prioritize ourselves enough to really speak truth to ourselves and really assess where we are. But once we do that, we're halfway along, I think, that crossing, if you will, and we can get to the other side if we have goals that are worth, going after.
Yeah,
Stu, what do you think about that?
Just keep going back to your happiness is your responsibility, and not to be so blunt about it, but I mean, honestly, that's where it had to start. At least for me, was I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired, and the only person that controls that is me. Now, here's the thing: it's like, that's a harsh, that's a mindset that gets you kind of into being miserably comfortable, right? Like that bravado power through, this is a you issue. But it comes down to that. To me, it comes down to the trust that you have within yourself. When I was at my worst, it was because I was filled to the brim of anxiety, depression, and self-sabotage. Like there wasn't room to walk away and get a breath and go, oh, you're being ridiculous. Like you're being too hard on yourself. I had to almost do the opposite. I had to give myself time to create space, to give myself the courage to be a little bit more critical of how I got there and why I'm choosing to continue to live this way. And to Chris, to your point, it was like, hey, look, I chose to leave the company too later on. I don't believe that was a byproduct of being miserably comfortable. I actually think there were other factors to that. But if I go back in time in my career, in a very wonderful career, there were times where that miserably comfortable set in. And because of that ability to create that space and bring in partners like Toby and Chris, you showed up multiple times in my career to provide that, whether you knew it or not. Whether it was a laugh on the phone or me sharing where, my insecurities are and you just listening, right? And Toby, you not trying to solve it, but just being there. That created that space for me to have the energy to tackle the conversation I needed to have with myself. And the last thing I'll say is that I think I end up in those places. I think people in general, people I've led in the past, and it's that clarity around purpose and really that identity. When that purpose is so clear, this conversation is so much easier. And when it's the purpose that is outside of yourself that you're trying to fulfill, it's almost like people are trying to sell you away from a dream. Like I want to make tons of money and have this robust career in life. And it's almost as if people are encouraging you to do that. And by doing that, sacrificing, I think we encourage each other to get to this place of miserably comfortable in our society at some level. And it's these conversations and the ones that we've had in the past that have given me permission to give myself grace. I think it's a word that doesn't get tossed around nearly enough, but that ability to give yourself grace to then build upon, well, where am I and where do I need to go? Toby said it, the vision of what you want and what you need is so critical to this process. But yeah, thanks.
Welcome. Yeah, I'm curious about for you guys, and you've hit it. But if I'm a listener out there and I'm maybe, hearing this miserably comfortable concept for the first time and having the same experiences that all three of us have in our own rights. But certainly, Chris, when you and I talked about it, and then Stu, you and I have had these conversations before as well, what's your recommendation to them? Again, I know you've hit on it, but like, just tell me what you would tell them of, hey, what to do now if I have now this awareness? What would you suggest? Chris, any thoughts? Like, what would your, give me a gem or give me a pearl or give me something you did, that like, hey man, I would start, or hey, if there's a woman out there who's thinking, a man out there that's thinking this, like, what would you tell them now that maybe they're either thinking they might be in that space or knowing that they are?
Yeah, I think, it goes back to groundedness for me, man. And you know how important that is for me in my life and just in our practice, right? And teaching people that. And it's just going through that truth telling. What I realized is, too, you said it, you got to own your own happiness. Like, you're the only one that can really be honest with yourself about where you are. Like, you're the only one that can look in the mirror and really be honest with, hey, am I being the best father? Am I being the best executive? Am I being the best son? The different roles that you play in your life. And to do it, to really catalog where you are versus where you want to be. And when you can start to be really truthful, that's what I did, Toby. That's what you helped me do, right? And it's like, all right, my number one value is family. Well, I'm on the road every week. As an executive, I'm flying around. I'm probably drinking too much. I'm hosting. I'm taking, spending too much time out. I get home late to the hotel in a lonely ass hotel. It's too late to call the kids, even though I wanted to call the kids, and they're at the age they don't really want to hear from me anyway. But in my head, I'm like, I gotta check in with the family, and I missed that opportunity, so I beat myself up about that. And then like day 2, I do it all over again. And then I come home and I'm exhausted from the trip and just, being delayed in Chicago for the 45th time. By the way, I got home at 12:30 last night, Toby. And it's just this grind. Then I show up, the next day and I'm just not really there. I'm a shell of my person, but yet I'm providing. I have this beautiful home. I have this, that we go on beautiful vacations. I have this huge title. Like, when I go into work, people respect me. And, I manage hundreds of people. Like, I made up this story, this like fake story in my head to just get me through these things, that when I'm really honest with myself, and what you helped me with, kind of just really understanding what my values are and how important it is to live with your values, I wasn't showing up well as a dad or as a husband. And I had to be really honest with myself and and then figure out, okay, what can I do? How can I change that? Well, you can make sure you do make that call every night. You can not drink as much. You can, there's some things that you helped me with, and I just started to peel back and started to reprioritize what was really important in my life. And I started to see some return on that, and so I think it's just that those groundedness exercises, that truthfulness with yourself, like how are you really showing up in the spaces that are important to you, and those ideals are the roles that you play in your life that are really, really important to you, and really catalog and how you're showing up versus where you want to be. And then, the work that you and I talk about a lot, and what you help me with is, all right, let's start identifying those obstacles. And if it's that important to you to change, because these are the roles that are your value, then let's start doing the work, and let's start removing and start getting through some of these obstacles. Let's not start moving, like pushing them aside. Let's get right through them and deal with them. And so that's, again, that's pretty intricate. I was blessed, right, to have a coach in my life to help me work through some of that stuff. You kept pushing me to do the work on myself, to go inside and start to figure some of this stuff out, to journal some of this stuff, to reprioritize how I was really showing up in my life. So I was blessed with that. But that would be my recommendation, to really get grounded and start to be honest with yourself.
Thanks, buddy.
Well said.
That's great. Stu, I'm curious on your front. It might be similar, might be a little different, but it's your truth.
Yeah.
What would you say?
For me, there's like 2 or 3 things that come to mind while Chris was talking. It resonated a lot of what he said. I just put myself in a position of someone in that space. And the first thing is really going back to Chris's point about being grounded and really understanding what the root cause. There tends to be a couple of themes that play through that create, at least for me, it was. And one of them was the need of acceptance, being accepted. And so I was willing to sacrifice myself a lot for the betterment of what I perceive to be the team, the family, whatever. And it's that martyrdom, right? It's falling on the sword and complaining while I'm falling on it, but yet I'm choosing to fall on it. So for me, it was like, well, what is really creating this need to continually to push through that misery? And it's like, well, I want acceptance. I need people to want me, right? And once I was able to identify that, then I could be like, all right, let's define that a little deeper. What people, right, do I want acceptance from? And those are the ones that are probably wanting me to be much more mentally healthy than push through for a net income point, right? The second thing that comes to mind is, for me, it was the internal voice that created the majority of the challenges for me. And it was really, for me, it was actually putting a name to that voice, right? And understanding that that was not inside of me. Those were all the insecurities and all the damage for years that I empowered to speak to me, and I would listen to it. And so it was really important for me to understand my internal true ideal self, that voice, and what that voice sounded like and felt like, and the one that was self-sabotaging and the one that was the saboteur in my story. And once I understood those voices and what they, how they would impact my life, it was much easier to kind of control and challenge the one that was taking me down that path of miserably comfortable. And then, the third thing is, I just watched this video this morning by Jamie Dimon, who is, I think, the CEO of Wells Fargo, or no, JP Morgan Chase. And he was talking about work-life balance this morning. And he said, hey, work-life balance is not a company's responsibility on any level. They provide, in his mind, he's like, we provide healthcare, we provide coaches, shrinks, we got, coffee machines, we got everything that we can do to provide it. Work-life balance and happiness is an inside-out job. And what I find in that is some truth, some honesty about, to your point, Chris, and I've done this, sabotage everything in life because I'm unhappy. And the reality is those things around me are the things that are holding me up. And they're not the creation of the dysfunction. They're actually the ones that are keeping the wheels on the bus. And so that's why I just keep coming back to that. This is an inside out me job. This is a me problem. This is a me opportunity. Although it's much better to do it with help and to do it with support. And like we said, coaching, we've been coaching for years. This is the walk that we tend to do with most people. And it comes back to, where are you? Where do you want to go? What's getting in the way? And what is the narrative that you're telling yourself? What is that storyline? And are you feeding that? And, for a lot of ways, because of the insecurity, I would feed that monster because there was no other monster to feed. It was the only one that was listening. And so I would give it all its energy it needed. But the reality was it was the wrong voice. So.
That's great, Stu. And I think what you've just nailed is, and it's part of that journey that you guys know well, that we take people on, the obstacles, right? Chris, you alluded to it, just, like, hey, what's going to get in the way? And I love what you just said, the external obstacles that, self-induced from the acceptance perspective, but then the internal inner critic, the imposter fears, all of the things that are now, people talk a lot about. But those are going to be the things in the way. Again, as easy as it seems to have a goal, get after the goal and execute on the goal, especially when it comes to yourself, it seems simple, but it's very difficult to do. Yeah. And there's just a lot of, whether it's perceived risk or real risk, but the risk factors, and it gets back to kind of just that overall point that I just make and would want people to just hear again is creating that vision for yourself is important. It's an important part of this. Telling the truth first and foremost is the best place to start. Where are you and how are you feeling with regards to being on that path of purpose and fulfillment and happiness or not? Are you bored? Are you, kind of going through the motions? Are you miserably comfortable? And if you get to that point of awareness on that and have a goal and have an idea of where you'd like to go, just recognize that these, it's rough waters in between those two banks, the metaphor that I keep using. And you'll constantly be challenged. And I just know enough about human behavior that you won't need too many big waves to send you backwards. Right. So what I would just say is just keep reassessing constantly. What's the value in this?
Mm-hmm.
What's the value in this place that I want to get to? What's the value in this version of me I want to aspire to? What's the value in this of me finding fulfillment in my current role and position and career? What's the value? Because I think if we can continue to keep making sure there's enough value in that, I truly, truly, truly believe it in my heart, and I know it for myself, then I'll go through any of those waves and obstacles and any of those self-doubts and insecurities and whatnot. I need to do it with someone, Stu. I think that's so spot on. I think you got to take someone in tow with you, whether it's just keeping up with you and how are you doing along the way, or whether it's help swim with you. Yeah. There's no doubt about that, and we'll say that for the rest. As coaches, we are a big believer of that very principle. But that's the thing that I would just, that's the overall kind of what I would do and how I would go about it. And eyes wide open, just make sure that when you do hit those waves, that you're just checking the value of what it is that you're trying to get to.
Hey, Toby, can I ask you a question? You've been so good at asking us. I got one for you. So I'm sitting here thinking, I'm like, when I was in that phase of discovery of where the dysfunction, where the pain was coming from, that was creating that miserably comfortable, I found myself at a time wondering if I could trust myself, right? Do I trust that I'm actually thinking clear right now, right? Like when you're in that place of miserably comfortable and making this decision, this conversation that we have right now, how does one go into that space and commit to that change if they've been in a state for so long of uncertainty, right? Like for Chris, it was the career change, like the restructuring gave a moment to make a decision. For me, and I'll go back, probably 5 years where that miserably comfortable existed. It was, I chose to kind of redefine my identity, go a different path. But to make that decision, there's so much courage to believe in that it's the right decision, that you're not making a mistake. And it goes back to courage. I'm just curious, you see people all the time in your coaching practice, I guess it's a two-part question. Any advice for somebody that feels like they have clarity on what that change needs to look like, but yet just doesn't maybe trust themselves to make it?
Yeah, Stu, the first thing that comes to mind is marrying the heart and the head. I think so much we put too much emphasis on what our head thinks in terms of, is it worth it? Is it not? Can I do it? Can I do it? What's the risk? I know I keep going down to risk, but we really are creatures of, either risk taking or risk saving. Like we don't want to risk something because we the mindset of what it would cost me is always on the forefront of our mind, and we attribute value to it because it's kept us safe. And I can't disagree with any of that, right? But it's when we don't trust. The trust for me would be, do you trust the feelings? Do you trust how you feel when you're starting to stretch yourself out of your comfort zone? In as much as that's uncomfortable, does it feel gratifying? You guys know this. You know this. Yeah. When you're trying something new for the first time you've ever done it, there's a great level of excitement in it, even though you're left-footed and you're bumping into walls, but you're like, man, I did not do that like I normally do everything else in my life. But boy, does that feel gratifying. And that's the word. It feels different, or it feels something. And I just think that we get this is just, it may not be the right answer, but it's my answer, is we disconnect the head and the heart so much. And when we are doing this, we got to bring both into play. And in some instances, I would say the intuitive, trust your gut. What's my heart feel? How do I feel about this practicing something I'm not very good at, even though I like to be perfect at everything? How does it feel? Most people don't ask themselves that question, but if they really sat with it, they'd come back and say, I feel alive. And at the end of the day, I always tell people, I'm like, you got to have those butterfly moments, in my opinion, because it's a good barometer of living life. Like if you aren't butterfly moments about everything, the convo you need to have with your mom and dad that you haven't had it, have it. Because, because it makes me feel, I'm feeling great. I love the feeling. So how do we work through those butterflies and make sure you're living that life? So that's where I would, I just think we've got to marry the two, if not maybe make our heart maybe the boss of this change rather than be so in love with what our head says.
That's awesome. Thanks, Toby. Chris, how about you?
I just love that answer.
Is there a view there?
Yeah, I'm going to just go off of Toby's answer because there's so many things there. Like first of all, I have a colony of butterflies living in my stomach now after making the change, and it's been awesome. Like so scary, but just awesome building this thing with you guys. So I mean, I get up in the morning and I just have just a different energy, just a different, not a stressful energy. Not I have to do this, but I get to do this, and that's just been so cool. And I'm fortunate because I back in the moment, Stu, when we were restructuring, and I made the decision to choose. I don't know if I would have said, "Well, I'm so fortunate." I probably would have said the opposite. Like, what the fuck's happening to me right now? Why me? Right? And I'm sure I went through that. But to your point, like I squashed the heart, man. Like when I was miserably comfortable, like I didn't even give the heart a chance to talk because I didn't feel like I could follow it, And I remember just having conversations with Joy, and it was all him. It was all like, hey, this is how much money we're gonna make. Yeah, this is if we do this, we're gonna get this payout. If I get this payout, we get to do X, Y, and Z. And I remember like after those conversations feeling so like just shallow and not me. And that's why I became like me being miserably comfortable. I just became I turned into a different person. My dad's been telling me that for years, man, subtly, like, hey, Chris, that's not really that important, but okay. Yeah, no, I'll support you. He was always there to support me, but kind of like, really, this is what you're worried about right now? Like this is not that important in life. So he was giving me moments of clarity that I wish I could have listened to. And I wish I was in a state of listening to, but I literally I pushed down my heart so far because I just couldn't feel like I could follow it, man. And it was all head. And it wasn't until I got presented an ultimatum, just an opportunity, whatever you want to call it. And I said, and holy shit, was I scared then, man. But to your point, I was so excited. Stu and I had a conversation. This is funny for the listeners. Like Stu was my boss, and I got restructured out of a job, a job that I thought I was doing pretty good at. And it's just, economy and all that other stuff. Right. And I remember sitting across from Stu and saying, I think I gave all I have to this. I want to go do something else. And I was super clear. That's what I was going to do. And I ended up taking like a 3-hour walk around Annapolis, right? Literally 3 hours. And I was so scared, but I felt my heart again, Tobe. Like I was so excited. And I was like, and I talked to my dad, and I talked to Joy, and Joy was awesome. And Joy could feel my excitement and my enthusiasm. She's like, hey, I don't care let's go. Because if you're going to bring this much passion to it, like anything's going to work. So I just, for the people out there listening that are going through this, I just tap into that heart again, man. Like let it speak, listen to it. It may take a while for it to come to fruition, right? For you to work through like what it's really saying and stuff, but don't squash it like I did.
It's huge. Not to, I know we're bumping up on time here, but one of the things that comes to mind is we also have people in our audience that are potentially going to hear this and assume that this is a weak mindset, right? That there's the opposite of this, and that this is when we worry about these things, we're not worried about the task at hand and the goals. And, there's that psychology of goal attainment that comes into play in defining something like miserably comfortable, which we certainly have lived through. I think there's some advice that we could probably offer the people that are out there that are saying, I'm not there right now. I don't think this applies to me. This isn't, and it may not. And I'll let you guys chime in. But for me, it's like, it may not, it didn't show up for me for a good amount of time. But I think it's the awareness of it's, if that grounded conversation is done in the right way, then in a lot of ways you can build off of that. Right. And really start to define where you are, because what I caution everybody in the audience that's saying, hey, this doesn't apply to me, I'm not there yet. That might be an old guy thing. Like once you get to 50, you find yourself miserably comfortable. Yeah, but what I would tell you is that the absence of awareness is how this gets bred. The absence of knowing oneself and knowing what are those boundaries within yourself. And I would say as a high performer, early in my career, I had clarity on what those boundaries were, but it was the depletion of those boundaries over time that ultimately I found myself in that state. And so I would just encourage you, good job. I'm proud, applause to those that are operating at 110%. And this isn't showing up. But I would just say, if you're in that space, be aware that it could end up this way if you continue to ignore the signs that we've shared with you. And my only advice to you is, when the signs show up, don't try to figure it out internally. I had awesome dialogue with my wife, with my parents. My dad said very similar things like, hey, that job has changed you. And it was like, I was kind of like, well, that's because you've never done it. I put it into his story, not mine. And it's like, I come back to this place of, I wish I would have listened to the people that were around me a little bit more, that saw me deplete that boundary over time. So any thoughts for that audience member that's like, hey, I'm not there yet, or this doesn't apply to me? I'm curious on what you all would say.
Yeah. Hey, it's a great way to kind of wrap this thing up there, Stu. I love what you said. Here's what I know in my experience. The highest potential people, or the highest achieving people, highest performing people that I've ever been around, or I've read about, or I've watched, have a higher tolerance of discomfort than the rest of us. Mm-hmm. They also pursue those butterfly moments more often and regularly than the rest of us. So I think some of them have God-given abilities, no doubt, and we'll just put those guys and girls into different buckets. But the ones that can tolerate their discomfort, and pursue those butterfly moments more regularly and often, and with, to your point, Stu, like having a mission and a plan of, like, what do they want out of this? Those are the people I believe are just at a different level. They're just at a different level of happiness and success and fulfillment and achievement and performance. And they're the people we want as part of our teams. We want to hire these folks. We want to be led by these folks. We want to have these people as our parents, for crying out loud, so there's just so many different things to it. But it, it goes in the face of, human behavior, because humans will do everything they can under the sun to stay comfortable. So it's just those that are willing to are the ones that I think are going to be at the very highest levels. So I think it's a wonderful way to just kind of summarize what we've talked about. And Chris, I'll shoot it over to you, but this has been a great conversation on my end. And I appreciate you guys all listening, and also the questions and back and forth, because it's so interesting to hear from the two of you on your own respective experiences on this. And it's part of the path, no doubt about it.
Amen. Well, hey, Toby, thanks to you, man, for bringing this up and for introducing this to me through your experiences and giving a name for me to play with and get curious about, because it was very applicable at that stage of my life. And again, I'm excited to pay it forward and help other people through it. So, hey, thanks for joining us today. We're happy to have you on the path. Remember, every journey is unique, and every step you take shapes that journey. Not everybody's going to go through, like Stu said, this miserably, but if you do, hopefully this concept and this dialogue got you curious. Stay curious, keep exploring, stay curious, and give yourself grace as you forge your path. Until next time, stay true to yourself and keep walking the path.